When we think of fossils, we usually picture bones or shells or other remnants of ancient creatures preserved in stone. But fossils aren't just about bones. They're also about the climate, both the conditions that created them and the effects they had on life back then. And they can tell us a heck of a lot about our changing world today if we know where to look. Hi, it's me, and this is Crash Course Geography. In fact, there are two main types of fossils that tell us about climate. The first is a type of sedimentary rock called varve clay. Varves form when there's a lot of sediment in glacial meltwater, kind of like how rivers carry sediment from higher elevations to lower elevations. Only instead of river water, it's glacial water that was once part of a massive ice sheet. These sediments often have a distinctive layered appearance, and each layer is dated to a single year. You see, during the Pleistocene epoch, which lasted from around 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, there were dozens of glacial periods or ice ages punctuated by warmer interglacial periods like the one we're currently in. Varves record all these fluctuations. Each annual layer reflects the deposition of material during a particular glacial period or interglacial. So by looking at the thickness of layers, scientists can tell how much sediment was carried by glacial meltwater during that year and determine whether it was deposited during a warmer or colder period. This helps them understand not only how climate changed over time, but also how species responded. For example, the Younger Dryas was an abrupt return to colder temperatures that began around 13,000 years ago, just as the warming trend that ended the last ice age was in full swing. During this time, glaciers advanced again, covering more land with ice and lowering sea level as more water was locked up in glaciers. And in North America, the ice sheet extended as far south as the southern tip of the Hudson Valley. In Greenland, evidence of the Younger Dryas is written in the thickness of varves. Around 10,900 years ago, as the Younger Dryas came to an end, Greenland's ice sheet started melting rapidly, causing huge floods of meltwater that carved new valleys and fjords into the island. A core sample taken from the ocean floor off the west coast of Greenland contains a continuous varve record from the peak of the last ice age through the Younger Dryas and the onset of the Holocene, the current interglacial period. The youngest layers are at the top of the core, and the oldest are at the bottom. Scientists can see evidence of the Younger Dryas in the thinning of the varves. The cold lasted for about 1,300 years. Then the varves thicken again, indicating a rapid increase in meltwater discharge as temperatures rose. And even though the exact cause of the Younger Dryas is still debated, we can learn a lot from what happened afterwards. By studying the varves, scientists learned that after the Younger Dryas, there was a 50% increase in vegetation across the North Atlantic region as the warmer climate allowed forests to expand northward. This led to a big increase in carbon storage in the northern hemisphere and helped kick off the current interglacial period, which has been great for humans because it's been relatively warm and stable. Well, except for the whole mega drought in the American Southwest that's been going on for about 12 years now. But it's hard to say if that's part of a natural cycle or the result of human-caused climate change. Which brings us to the second main type of fossil that tells us about climate, body fossils. These are the preserved remains of plants and animals, things like shells, teeth, and bones. Body fossils are great because they preserve the actual tissues of ancient organisms. And unlike varves, they don't need to be in a sedimentary environment to form. Take, for example, the deep-sea foraminifera. These single-celled organisms have shells made of calcium carbonate, and they live in the ocean. Some of them float near the surface, and others crawl along the seafloor. While they're alive, their shells accumulate on the seafloor, and because they're so small, they're often overlooked. But scientists have studied the ratio of different forms of oxygen in their shells to reconstruct past ocean temperatures. The ratio reveals clues about the temperature at which the shells formed because the forms of oxygen react differently when temperatures rise. For example, in warmer waters, the lighter form of oxygen becomes more abundant in the shells, So by measuring the ratios in shells from different layers of sediment, scientists can map changes in ocean temperature over time. And it turns out that in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Peru, there was a dramatic shift in temperature around 800 years ago. The temperature of the surface waters went from about 21 degrees Celsius to about 17 degrees Celsius, which is about the same amount of warming we might see from continued climate change. But before scientists could use forums to track the temperature drop, they needed to find a way to date them. Enter another type of body fossil: corals. Corals grow in warm, shallow waters, so they're poikilothermic, meaning their body temperature fluctuates depending on the surrounding environment. That makes them really useful for tracking temperature changes, especially when scientists developed radiocarbon dating to track changes over time. Now, scientists know that a sudden temperature drop around 800 years ago affected the western coasts of South America and Africa, potentially caused by a massive volcanic eruption in what's now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in Earth history, and it disrupted ocean currents, leading to cooler surface waters along some tropical coastlines and warmer waters elsewhere. In fact, there are tons of examples of body fossils being used to help us understand climate change. We can use tree rings to reconstruct the climate during the life of a tree. By studying the size and shape of shells, we can figure out how fast marine organisms grew under different environmental conditions. And by analyzing chemical signatures in shells and bones, we can learn how much carbon there was in the atmosphere when they were alive. All of these body fossils help fill in the gaps in our understanding of past environments and how life has responded to those environments over time. And that can help us understand what might happen in the future. For example, we can examine the otoliths inside the inner ear of fish to see how they grew in past environments. Otoliths are important for balance and hearing, but they also record details about the environment in which the fish lived. For example, scientists compared the growth rings of otolith from lake fish today with historical records of water temperature and precipitation. By matching up the width of the rings to the environmental records, they found that precipitation was a better predictor of otolith width than temperature. This means that during wetter years, the fish grew faster. Once they had that relationship established, they could use the width of the rings in fossilized otolith to reconstruct past precipitation levels. And when they did this in the Great Lakes, they discovered that between 400 and 800 years ago, there was a megadrought similar to the one we're experiencing today. The more data we get from these kinds of fossils, the better we can understand how life responds to a changing climate. And this knowledge is essential as we try to predict what will happen in the future. So next time you hear about a new discovery about ancient life, remember that it might contain clues about our changing world. Understanding past climates and how living things have responded to them is key to predicting what will happen in the future. And while we may never know exactly what the future holds, we do know that the story of our planet is one of constant change. By learning from the past, we can better understand the challenges we face today and tomorrow. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Geography, which is filmed at the Team Sandoval Pier studio and was made with the help of all these nice people. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on a crowdfunding platform.